Do you know, I've always been obsessed by the speech. It's one of those things where, as it were, when I feel as though I need repassioning, I watch it. And in fact, it starts with him saying, "We are in hell now." And the UN Secretary General said, "We're on the highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator." So when we were trying to think of some way of inspiring people, you know, about what they can do and the situation it is and hope that they can have and determination to change paths, it leapt into my mind. And also, we're using this analogy of being halfway through the game of the Sustainable Development Goals because we are, you know, halfway to 2030. So it seemed like an excellent tool to use.
Well, the thing carries a punch. Does it worry at all, though, that some people might read it as this is just going to be too difficult? Actually, let's not bother.
I suppose I'd reply that by saying Liverpool, AC Milan, 3-0 down at half-time, and they win 4-3. I mean, the amazing thing about the world at the moment is there are so many powerful tools that could be being used that, and you know, there's massive investment in renewable energy, there's all the potential of AI, there are incredible medical breakthroughs with regard to maternal mortality and things like that. So in many cases, it's just a question of a determination, as it were, a new game plan, a determination to exploit those things that we could be doing instead of sitting and saying, well, it is difficult, we might as well give up at half-time.
This is being done for the United Nations. Some people are saying that the United Nations, worthwhile intent, but pretty poor execution. They can't even throw Russia off the Security Council, given what they've done. How can we have confidence that this is the organisation to lead this of the most extraordinarily important fight possibly in human history?
Well, the United Nations, you know, were the people who developed these goals, but all those goals were signed on to by 193 countries. So the truth of the matter is that responsibility, you know, lies with the UN to do the best work that it can. But what this film is trying to say is it's also every leader, every business leader, every teacher, and then every citizen.
On this team, we fight for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's going to make the difference between winning and losing.
The last thing I'm saying is leave it to the UN, they'll deal with it. What this is saying is actually to everybody in the world, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to see whether or not we can turn so many things around?
But of course, it's not just the states or their leaders who matter here. In the end, actually, it's the people who have to change their behaviours, who have to buy new ways of heating and or cooling their homes. And there's a considerable degree of pushback, both here in the UK and also in the United States, and in fact, all over the developed world, that all of this is too expensive, too difficult for ordinary people.
Yeah, well, you know, that is, we are in a cost of living crisis. It's been really a very tough few years with conflict, with COVID. And the question is, you know, the SDGs were always intended to both apply to our own countries as well as countries abroad. But there are a lot of choices you can make that, as it were, don't have financial implications. Let's say the bank that you bank with. Now, some banks are pouring money into new fossil fuels. Don't bank with one of those banks. If you've got a pension, try and get a pension that is actually sustainable and is supporting things. You'll make just as much money on that pension. You know, there are clothes that you can buy, there's local food that you can buy. There are so many things that if we apply ourselves to them, it's not a sort of morals versus money issue. It's focusing on the way that you yourself can change the world, how you vote, all these things. So it's not saying it's a more expensive option. I've heard Mark Carney who was governor of the Bank of England, describes sustainability as the biggest investment opportunity since the Industrial Revolution. It's changing your way of thinking about how we apply the wealth that we have.
Now, making that happen, in a way, does depend on political leadership. I think, something that you've written about or made films about, that you've had lots to say about over the last 30 years. And in fact, possibly one of the most important, most famous political speeches of our lifetime was created by you. And I'm going to show our audience a clip of it going back to the days of Love Actually.
We may be a small country, but we're a great one too. The country of Shakespeare, Churchill, the Beatles, Sean Connery, Harry Potter. David Beckham's right foot. David Beckham's left foot, come to that. And a friend who bullies us is no longer a friend. And since bullies only respond to strength, from now onward, I will be prepared to be much stronger. And the president should be prepared for that.
It's 20 years since we saw that speech, and since then we've had Donald Trump, Brexit, US-led military action in Libya and Syria, the special relationship coming into question. Do you think what you wrote then is still relevant today?
Do you know, it's more important than it was then. I think that is the point. I mean, I think of ourselves as being in a climate war. I'm worried by the gentleness of the words climate warming when it's climate boiling, climate firing, climate melting, all of these things. So, it's always a question of determination to take things from where we are now. I think, these are harder times, but they're times also with greater potential. I think since then, $1 trillion, has been invested in renewable energy. The world is changing. We've got AI. There are so many ways that we can exploit the situation that we're in. Certainly, at half-time, the thing that was never any use to say, that was tough, I think we're going to lose. There are so many, and I meet people all the time who are doing extraordinary work to try and improve their own communities and try and help people both at home and overseas. My personal experience is of a passionate younger generation committed to equality of gender, committed to equality of race, committed to the climate fight. And what we're trying to say to that generation and politicians wanting the votes of that generation is let's, screw ourselves to the sticking post and actually work harder, try harder, use all the new tools that we've got in our armory. I've always been an optimist, and I'm an optimist because I see so many people doing so many extraordinary things.
That speech and what you've just said are all really about political inspiration and political leadership. Do you think that the political leadership that we have on both sides of the Atlantic is really up to the demand that's being made by this new generation?
Well, look, I think there are extraordinary things that Biden is doing. And I've always believed there are great politicians and people of goodwill, in the UK. And the thing about, what you're saying to the public is if you engage with it, politicians will engage with it more. I've never, ever experienced a politician who hasn't said if we hear it from the public, we're much more likely to do it. So I think we have to, be hopeful and be determined. And as it were, as our little film says, what are you going to do? We've got to try and do things like, as it were, the making of this film, which will, with any luck, make a difference.
OK, when you come to make your next movie about political leadership, and we have a British political elite, who would you be casting as Mr. Keir Starmer now?
The strange thing is Keir Starmer was apparently the inspiration for Colin Firth's part as a human, for Colin Firth's role in Bridget Jones. So I'm going to go for Colin, although I think he'll have to put on a little bit of weight.
What advice are you offering to Keir Starmer? It looked like he could conceivably be our next Prime Minister.
Well, look, I would, say to Keir Starmer that I think he should pay a lot of attention to the SDGs. and, you know, fulfill all the promises that are being made about Britain becoming a great, new, expanding green economy. You know, I think this is terrifically important, the urgency of all these issues.
This new short film is, again, about inspiration and leadership, and I just wondered what you made of what we've got now in the terms of leadership. I'm not really asking you about left or right.
I think that, you know, cometh the hour, cometh the man. And, you know, I think that when you're faced with reality of political power, it's very interesting how you use it. And I'm just saying, in this film, every leader, rethink your determination, rethink the urgency of the moment, look at what's happening on climate, look at what's happening on poverty, and, you know, be as imaginative and determined. And I think the key thing is this idea that every leader has two jobs in their own country and globally, because, as it were, no country is an island, and it's absolutely important that Britain, which has always been the greatest country in terms of the foundation of organisations like, say, the Children of Oxfam, in all the leadership that they've showed in, you know, Live Aid, Live 8, all of those things, that Britain should, as it were, reclaim its natural position as one of the people who try and change the world for the better.
Richard Curtis, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you very much indeed.